Pieter-Louis Myburgh is in the house. So your video on an attempted bribe went super viral.
They offered me tenders.
You could have
The
been a
offer was, I
tender.
could be a proper tenderpreneur. I could have my own waterfall country estate pad right now.
My man, can we introduce you on a little something? Yeah,
I'm gonna take a picture, right? I first have to look what's in the
The question for normal South Africans is, how far does the rot go?
Absolutely to the executive top.
Comrades, we're on location at the Daily Mavericks The Gathering 2025 Changemakers Impact Edition. We are going to be interviewing some of the country's most influential people and finding out, are they bribable? This is the Politically Aware podcast. Let's get away. Comrades, we're hanging out with investigative journalist and author from the Daily Maverick, Pieter-Louis Myburgh is in the house. Peter, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward. I'm actually a fan of the show. It's my first time on, I believe, so it's going to be good.
Thank you very much, bro. That makes me even more nervous. It's like when you have fans of the show on the show, it's like,
I shouldn't have said that.
Thank you very much for coming, bro. You're the author of the book, Gangster State. You covered a lot of state capture work. Are you working on a book, Mafia State?
That's a good follow-up. I'm working on one conceptually called Gangster's Paradise, GP, because there's so much stuff happening in this whole thing. Possibly, but I mean, yeah, that's like very early days. It might not materialize because my current work at Daily Maverick is also very demanding. So maybe at some point I have some time to channel into that too. It's about time.
Gangster's Paradise is cool. I'm thinking Coolio on the cover.
Yeah, we can get him down here for the book launch.
You know what I'm saying? Peter, are we in a mafia state?
We are, unfortunately, to a degree, in the mafia state. We are. That's a short answer. I mean, in no normal society do people like Pavita Dukaran get gunned down simply for doing her work and flagging corruption issues. In no normal country do other whistleblowers, municipal officials, get shot dead outside of their homes when they flag corruption, and this routinely does happen in South Africa.
For our young viewers, Peter, what is a gangster state?
I think a gangster state is one where the nexus between government and contractors has fundamentally been corrupted. So state capture, this kind of gangster state phenomenon, we've seen it with the Gupta Empire and other kind of contractors who specifically focus on government contracts. It becomes a corrupt symbiosis. There's a corrupt relationship. The contracts are frequently procured or obtained by means of corruption. The officials are co-opted and paid for and bribed to secure these contracts. There are tender irregularities, and there's also concomitant violence, as I mentioned, when other officials identify the shortcomings in these tenders and then raise the flag. So I think that kind of like frames the gangster state capture dynamic that unfortunately does mar South Africa to some degree.
So the Guptas are gone. Who is in charge now? And we have a commission coming up. Once the commission uncovers those people, who's waiting in the wings? Because that's what South Africa feels like now. It feels like it's one after the other, after the other, after the other. Do we know who's in charge now?
That's a good question. That's such a good point you raised, because I think there was this perception that the Zondo Commission, for instance, effectively dealt with state capture and corruption, and that was kind of the end of it. And, you know, we in this new dawn dispensation under President Ramaphosa, and there's no more corruption. And that we are increasingly finding is absolutely not the case. There were new players who entered the nexus that I spoke about earlier and are corruptly extracting rents and tenders from the state and perpetrating all sorts of other crimes related to that, money laundering, bribery, etc. And the players are, you know, to some degree, by all appearances, those that are currently being exposed in ongoing media reports by our publication, by News 24, by Bongani. I mean, the players and some of the faces have changed, but the dynamic and the nexus still exists. You know, still the same extraction networks, and that has not stopped, and it won't stop until we effectively curb that by instilling proper, you know, state policing methods to you know, arrest and prosecute individuals involved in these crimes.
Both former ministers of police have been pointed. The question for normal South Africans is, how far does the rot go?
Well, so the rot goes absolutely to the executive top of our government because, again, after state capture, the so-called post-state capture years, we exposed something like the digital vibes affair involving former Minister Zweli
Mkhize,
who was the health minister. So it shows you in those domains, the corruption goes to the very, very top of the governing party and government. And undoubtedly, these issues raised by Mkunazi point to the same kind of nefarious dealings involving politicians, contractors, middlemen, all the shady dealings that we supposedly dealt with at the Zondo Commission just seems to have gone on unabated in the Cyril Ramaphosa years.
We dealt with the issue with a colleague of yours, Karen Dolly, the historical part of organized crime all the way from during apartheid and now it's happening in 2025. My question to an investigative journalist like yourself is there hope? Where do we go? What can we do as South Africa? Is there anything we can do?
Let's celebrate our positives. So what is a big positive to highlight is the fact that in the previous awful dispensation of apartheid, journalists like myself would probably have been targeted and maybe killed by our government. They absolutely did not entertain any sort of opposition, and you had only very few publications who were brave enough to pursue this kind of investigative work, like the Vrye Weekblad with Jaco, the Rand Daily Mail, etc. So let's mark that. I think we are at least in that sense a little bit better off. Where we aren't that much better off, unfortunately, is in curbing this corruption through prosecution and making sure that it actually, it doesn't proceed. And, we need to fix the NPA and the Hawks to ensure that they stop this corruption. That's a very simple fix. People always want to proffer very complex answers. What's wrong with the mechanics and where does the corruption and state capture come from? The most effective deterrent is effective policing. I mean, it's as simple as that. It won't cease until people aren't assured that they'll probably end up in jail when they steal state funds.
Who are the better investigators, the journalists or the hogs?
Yeah, that's a good question. So look, I'll qualify that answer. And there's a lot of critique on those bodies, and there are pockets of excellence in the Hawks, definitely. So I know about and I'm in contact with very good officers in all those kind of spaces, SIU, Hawks, NPA, etc. But I think broadly speaking, there are very fundamental structural problems with those organizations. There aren't enough forensic investigators at the NPA, at the Hawks, etc. to do this work. They've been hollowed out. There was an exodus of those skills during the Zuma Gupta years. That's never been fixed. So frequently, my work definitely could very easily inform a prosecution. I mean, that is just the level of forensic work that goes into our reports, and the law enforcement bodies frequently do note that, and their work kind of like bounces off what we do. So there are still very good investigators out there. They're just few and far between. So I think there's really, and we're also not a very big band of journalists who can do this work, the forensic legwork, the money laundering, the trails, that kind of stuff. So yeah, we need more of those too, not just police people, but investigative journalists.
So your video on an attempted bribe went super viral.
Yeah.
Like proper viral.
Yeah.
Everyone is talking about it. How does it make you feel? What does it say about normal South Africans for normal South Africans to go that viral?
Yeah, so I think it went viral because people sort of, they relate to the problem. They know how big a problem corruption still is. We all feel it now. We've kind of like realized, I think, collectively that no, 4 years down, or 5, 6 years down, the President Ramaphosa sort of administration, we have not addressed those issues. And I think when people are confronted with something as compelling as video evidence, and I think this is why it went so viral, it's very unique sort of in South Africa and globally to capture a government official on camera doing what they did. And I think that's why it exploded. And of course, this ties into the actual story. People forget that the real story actually is the one I investigated and which they wanted to cover up by bribing me.
Yes.
And that's the story about the house and the EPWP. And again, it's why we do this work. We've got all these sort of questions about our motivations sometimes. And I do this work because there are 1,800 poor South Africans out in the Popo, Free State, Gauteng, Northwest, who plugged into this EPWP scheme and weren't paid. And Malacca and Colin Mashawana were building that house in the waterfall country estate. And there are questions about where that money came from.
Oh, this judgment against Mashawana that came out today, right?
It came out yesterday.
It came out yesterday.
Yes.
Are you elated? Are you excited?
Yeah, we're very happy. So we saw the work that went into our defense.
Yes.
And we noted their findings.
Yes.
So we did expect that a reasonable court would find in our favor. South Africa, thankfully, has very strong media freedom defenses. It's built into our constitution. And thankfully, the court also interpreted it as such. So very happy about the rulings. And now we can continue with this work. We can continue speaking about it. And we can continue delving into these networks and contracts that we've exposed at the IDTU.
We agree that journalists shouldn't be bribed. I imagine that's your take as well. Journalists shouldn't be bribed. To an extent, it's crazy to try and bribe an investigative journalist because that's the thing that keeps you going, right? But in a world where you could bribe a journalist, in a world, hypothetically, the crime is worth 800 million. Is 60,000 a fair introduction? Is it fair for somebody to go, listen, I've got 60?
Yeah,
If the crime is 800,
Yeah.
what should be the minimum?
Yeah.
Let's discuss.
Yeah, so I think it's very important that you raise that. So, I mean, the 60,000 Rand figure gripped the public attention because that is what they brought that day.
Yeah.
But that was not the offer. Remember, if you watch all our video work on that issue, they offered me tenders at the IDT.
You could have
The
been a
offer was, you could be a proper entrepreneur. I could have
You could be.
I could have my own waterfall country estate pad right now, with like maybe a Ferrari and a Bentley or two. And that was the actual offer, and the cash was a little bit of an extra boon. So
Should we
have
just
to keep that in
Should we
mind.
just call you Mcebisi Jonas?
Is it too late for me to reverse my decision? No, I think so. No, so look, I am not a person who could live with myself to partake in such dealings. So if there are people who are, that I'm happy for you, I suppose, if your conscience allows that. There's no money in the world that can silence me on a story where 2,000 South Africans went to bed hungry because they did back-breaking work on a contract and weren't paid because the CEO of that entity and the chairperson of the foundation were busy building a property.
that all the work that you were doing in this case only, the breakdown of the cost came to more than 250,000 rands. Right now, we're living in a country where the media is under threat from big tech.
Yeah.
With big tech, obviously, you've got AI summarizing stories. The media is not getting clicks, any payment from that. Google is saying, hey, man, we are helping the media out by giving them stories through searches. How does that make you feel as a journalist?
It makes me feel very worried about the future of journalism, and especially expensive journalism like investigative journalism. So, as you point out, obviously, there's this entire cottage industry and network of plucking our information and then filtering it into the public domain through other platforms, and it's kind of like essentially poaching. The sort of the flickers of hope are that, globally, Google, for instance, is now starting to be held to account for that. I mean, we've had this precedent-setting decision in Australia and other domains where they are now compelled to share some of that content, where it's provable that they are generating revenue off the back of media houses. That needs to be funneled into a fund and distributed evenly among those contributing news houses. And of course, now in South Africa, we have an ongoing discussion around that too, with the Competition Commission already having initiated those talks between Google and South African media houses. So whether the tech giants are going to, and it's not just Google, it's Facebook also, of course, and some of the other ones, whether they are going to participate in something like that or walk away, it's to be seen. But I think definitely for them, for their image and for their standing in society, it benefits them to pay their fair due where content is generated and distributed and they pocket money, and none of that reaches us. So let's hope they do the right thing.
My man, can we introduce you on a little something? Yeah,
I'm going to take a picture, right? I first have to look what's in the...
We're not saying stop
investigating.
We're just saying write something favorable, Unyana. we're not trying to stop you from doing your job. We're just saying, please do your job and write politically aware somewhere.
Yeah. It's a very nice offer, but I'll kindly decline. Thanks for having me on the show.
My brother, thank you very much for the job you're doing. Thank you very much for coming through to Politically Aware. Massive respect.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Comrades, Pieter-Louis Myburgh.